college. In order this weather, this particular heat, especially for her, so she feels like she didn't really leave Arizona. Her journey from a degree in landscape architecture to a career as president of a liberal arts college is a fascinating trajectory. I believe that she has a great deal to teach us about how an education and design affects the way a person thinks and how they lead. Preparing to speak to you tonight, President Cervelli made a statement that I think is quite meaningful. Leadership, at its heart, is design, construction, and careful tending of an environment that allows people to flourish. Architects understand how our surroundings, the buildings we occupy, the neighborhoods we inhabit, the landscapes we nurture, shape the character of the communities we create. In our world today, we often see design as limited to the aesthetic treatment of objects. In fact, design has a far broader application. In a world that is increasingly determines progress by distilling knowledge into facts and figures that can be measured and formatted into metrics, design deals with issues of judgment that cannot be quantified. Leadership, likewise, requires judgment. Leadership requires judgment and action, often with little or no data, or with incorrect data. Architectural education prepares us for lives of creativity, but also teaches us how to integrate disparate ideas and concepts. It prepares us for leadership at various levels and in diverse fields. I look forward to hearing President Cervelli's perspectives on the lessons learned on her journey from design student to current career as a college president. President Cervelli previously served as Dean of the College of Architecture and Landscape Architecture and Professor of Landscape Architecture at the University of Arizona, as well as Dean of the College of Architecture, Arts, and Humanities at Clemson University. Having grown up in South Bend, she received a bachelor's degree in landscape architecture from Purdue University in West Lafayette, and a master's in landscape architecture at the University of Guelph, Ontario, in Canada. She's held numerous national and international leadership positions and is an associate member of the Urban Land Institute, serving on the advisory board of the ULI Arizona. She has worked on a number of projects of interest to many of you, providing assistance to a number of cities throughout the United States, including Boston, Cincinnati, Louisville, Lexington, Greenville, Charleston, and Columbia, South Carolina. He has also worked with the city of Tucson on the development of models for reorganization of city planning and design services to better position the city for future growth. And President Cervelli is currently working on a book entitled La Città Murata Italiana, The Walled Towns of Italy. She's here today to discuss her training and experience in the field has informed the learning and working environment she has cultivated as a teacher and as an administrator. Please join me in welcoming to the school President Janet Cervelli.
Thank you. You all hear me really well. I have a disadvantage at my height behind large objects like this, so I'm going to kind of try to move around a little bit. I want to thank you for coming, particularly the students and the faculty. I know that this is a very busy time of year. You're probably undergoing reviews quite soon. I could, walking through the halls, kind of peeking into the studios, and I can feel the energy, the anxiousness, and the sweat, blood, and tears that are going into what you're doing now. So I wish you all very good luck. I very much appreciate and I'm very honored to be invited to come and join you here. I've always respected and admired the School of Architecture at the University of Notre Dame. You have a very special mission. I want to learn more about your mission and your work. This is a great opportunity to get to know each other, and I hope it's the beginning of many, many opportunities of conversations, discussions, and explorations of design of all sorts. We have much in common. We have design. We're members of the Holy Cross congregation, which is a major feature, I think, of how all of us think and craft our world. We're residents of the South Bend region, which I'm biased, but I believe is a very, very special place, particularly right now with many of the changes in the progressive nature of the city of South Bend. I'm a big fan of Mayor Pete, and I'll talk a little bit more about him later. But I am intrigued on the school's focus on traditional and classical architecture, urban design, your dedication to the principles that encourage community and a sense of place in the built environment. I hope to be able to come and actually join in on some of your classes if you'll have me, maybe some juries, etc. While my training and experience is not so steeply formed by classicism, I mean, I'm a student of Frederick Law Olmsted, G.L. Simons, Ian McHarg, and I have a very strong environmental imperative. I do believe and see the work that you're doing with your sustainability minors very much in sync with mine. And there are many foundational touchstones. I was especially struck by Dean Lakudis's statement on behalf of the school, and I think it's important to read it because I think it again is very special to Holy Cross congregational institution and the Catholic mission. Quote, knowledge reveals the basic facts, but we still need reason to prioritize and assemble this knowledge in a useful manner. We need virtue to direct us toward just ends. That is why faith is a crucial aspect of education. Without steadfast belief in a better future, virtue and reason give way to futility and cynicism. Only through conscious participation in the broader cultural project of the world can we hope to achieve our personal and public aspirations. Architects are asked to act, and through their work to illustrate a vision of how the world ought to be. When it was suggested that I speak as to architecture or architects as leaders, it gave me an opportunity to reflect. Many times we're so busy in our professions, in our studies, in our lives, just simply taking time away from devices, from media, from all the distractions that happen in life to really ask yourself, how did I get to where I am? Where do I want to go? And what are the tools that can help me be open to opportunities? And that's kind of an underscore of what I'm going to be talking about today. Unexpected pathways. So leadership is at its heart the design and construction carefully of tending the environment. And Michael shared my thoughts with you on allowing people to flourish. It really gets at the center of why are we designing? It's not about us. It's about the people that utilize and live with what we design. Architects understand the surroundings with which we design and the neighborhoods that we inhabit, the landscapes that we nurture. It's not about the object. It's about what happens inside and between the objects. I hope to share my training and experience in the field and how it's informed my design of learning environments in lots of different contexts, both as a landscape architect, as a teacher, and as an administrator. And how a landscape architect, urban designer became a college president. Now, many people ask me, are you like the first? I don't think so, but you know, it's not like there's an inventory out there of architects who have become college presidents. I know that there is one very significant architect by the name of James Barker. Jim Barker is president of Clemson University for, I believe, a dozen years. It was a licensed architect. But I think I may be the only formally licensed landscape architect who's become a college president. Now, that could either be really good or maybe an indicator of something, but I happen to think that it's a way for the future. And I would ask all of you, and I know particularly students, you're focused on practice, you're focused on your studio, but to consider how those kinds of skills can be adapted to a much broader view. The practice of architecture is going to look nothing in 10 years, in 5 years, as it looks today. And you need to be prepared for unexpected pathways. Make that part of your DNA, ready for the unexpected. I never set out to be a president, not a dean, not even a professor. I wanted to be a great landscape architect. I wanted to practice. I wanted to see things happen. Along the way, I developed a second passion in education. I learned that early on as a teaching assistant at Purdue University with a really terrific mentor, Professor Harrison Flint, who taught woody ornamentals. And it was through that experience of, now remember, we're in West Lafayette. It's January. I have my own little group where we're going and walking across a very large campus to identify trees, shrubs, and ground covers with no leaves, and it's 10 below. If you can learn to love teaching then, you know it's really going to stick with you for a long time. So it's that passion of education. So think about a person with a split personality, perhaps, of wanting to be a practicing landscape architect, very involved in the profession, and one in education, and loving education in the larger sense of that world. So in kind of thinking about myself and what makes my brain work, I'm a divergent thinker, and I was that way from the start. It was probably because I was the product of a professional dancer and an aeronautical engineer. Those were my parents. They couldn't have been more opposite, which was fabulous. I was born and raised right across the river from St. Mary's College. I was on Riverside Drive, that big greenway along that river, probably led to me being a landscape architect, along with my father, who was very involved in environmental issues around the South Bend area, the Michiana watershed, took us to all the national parks. I was a product of the environmental era of the 1970s, of that whole world. And my interests and hobbies as a child and teen hint at this proclivity of just being interested in the broad range. I went through a series of passions or phases as a kid. Study of frogs and turtles and fish at Pinhook Lagoon. Many of you've been there. Egyptian mummies, to drawing and painting, to creative writing, to presidential history, to competitive sports, to music. I did well in all these subjects, but then it was difficult to decide on a major in college. And so I didn't really decide until a month before classes started. And it was really by serendipity that I discovered landscape architecture as a profession. I'd never heard of it before. And I discovered it by going through a Purdue catalog and looking at majors. And when I started to read the combination of the disciplines that make up that profession, and the fact that there is a mission-based objective to landscape architecture of improving the environment and people's lives, it clicked immediately. Of course, my dad wasn't happy. He wanted me to be an engineer, desperately. And I was good at math, but it appeared to me to be extremely boring and uninspired. So that was my mother speaking to me. So when I was reading about landscape architecture, it really combined the arts, the fine arts, and the more scientific dimensions and engineering. Landscape architecture was the perfect choice for me because it combined all of my interests. And I was inspired by what I'd like to think of as divergent thinkers. Frederick Law Olmsted, the founder of the profession of landscape architecture, was a journalist, a social critic during the Civil War. He was an agriculturalist, a conservationist, a public administrator. He really created the Red Cross. He wrote a lot of public policy around health conditions in the cities during the time of the Industrial Revolution in the United States. Of course, he was one of the designers of Central Park, so that's one of his products. I found that amazing how someone could put together all of those concepts where no one had before into a park of that scale and that kind of a context. I, at the same time, again, was really loving teaching and decided I really fought between being a practitioner of landscape architecture, worked for Leroy Troyer and Associates here in Mishawaka for a number of summers and through a year, but the call for teaching just never seemed to go well. Continued on through school and graduate school with the idea of going into teaching. I also became a licensed landscape architect, so again, I was practicing and teaching at the same time on a tenure track path. My path was certainly led by my way of thinking and seeing the world. It is perhaps inherent to me as a person. As I mentioned, I really had very broad interests and characteristics, but also through my training. So nature and nurture was definitely playing at the same time. I think it's summarized by the Nobel Prize winning political scientist Herbert Simon. Engineering, medicine, business, architecture, and painting are concerned not with the necessary, but with the contingent, not how things are, but how they might be. In short, with design, everyone designs who devises courses of action aimed at changing existing situations into preferred ones. I have always found landscape architecture infinitely interesting. I'm going to be 61 years old in Saturday, and I find my profession to be as interesting today as a freshman, like maybe some of you, in the first day of class at Purdue University. It has a limitless range of disciplines that you can see the world and problems through. Earth sciences, geology, biology, hydrology, engineering, social sciences, sociology, political sciences, economics, anthropology, psychology, to the traditional humanities, philosophy, literature, history, to the aesthetics and the creative arts. It is also a design profession with a limitless scale. I have a fascination with scale and going in and out in scale. From designing the size and shape of a bolt on a handrail, to planning the interconnected multimodal transportation system for an entire region. And I've done both, the latter particularly looking at connecting northern Mexico up through Arizona, up through Wyoming, Montana to Canada, and creating an alternative north-south trade corridor that's all interconnected with technology as well as multimodal transportation. It's the dimensions that both the design object, small and large scale, and the design process that leads one to that. For the same reason, I thrive in the university. Not just staying in one department, but having the intellectual thirst to want to take courses across the field, to want to teach with faculty across the field, to create new and interesting degrees across disciplines and fields. It's that inter and intradisciplinary portion that's clicked with me in the university context that is a little bit more difficult in practice. I was never satisfied, however, in the university context to look at things only theoretically and conceptually at a distance. I wanted to see action. I wanted to see change, and I wanted to see impact. And I wanted to see opportunities for students to be able to learn. So such a mindset formed my leadership style and approach, looking for connections, creating creative in the process of synthesis around learning and the experience of learning. At some point, I thought, what is it that I'm meant to be doing to have a fulfilling, meaningful, and happy life? I hope you're able to do that through all the different phases of your lives. I hope students, you're doing that today and thinking about the major, the profession that you've chosen. What I've discovered in order to find my life's purpose is a need to balance the following four aspects: passion, mission, vocation, and profession. That which you do well and that which you love is your passion. You have to have that. Or you'll pursue a career that will be as dull and as lifeless. You might make a nice living, but it'll end there. That which you love and the world needs is your mission. That's St. Mary's College for me now. That which the world needs and for that which you will get paid will be your vocation. You have to have that. That which you get paid and for that which you do well will be your profession. You really need to have all of that. And they may come and go in different ways and different combinations over the course of your life. And I feel like I have come full circle in great, great fortune and blessing. Finding one's purpose requires a deep and often lengthy search of self. This is a lifelong pursuit. Yet, as I've found, discovery is one of one's purpose brings great satisfaction and meaning in life, and I hope that we're all in search of that. We live in constant turbulence and disruption in an uncertain world. I don't know about you, but it feels more that way today than at any other point that I can recall. And many of us in the room, we lived through the Vietnam War, the Cold War, all of those pieces. We can't keep up with the pace of change, let alone get ahead of it. At the same time, the stakes are very high: financial, social, environmental, political, and they're rising. The digital revolution, the integration of digital technology, social, mobile, analytics, and the cloud is transforming how we live, business and industry, work and engage each other. The first wave, the rise of social media, big data analytics, the second wave, and now artificial intelligence. What is artificial intelligence going to do to the profession of architecture? Have you thought about that? Has there been discussions about that? We're talking about this at St. Mary's relative to all the kind of work that our soon-to-be graduates will be entering into, and higher education in general. There are big challenges. It takes a different way of thinking to connect disparate fields, and maybe desperate fields too, put big ideas into action, solve global problems, and imagine what's next. Do you feel stuck like I do? Do you feel like society is stuck? It's not able to take action? That's how I feel. It takes left brain and analytical skills. It takes right brain creativity. It takes architecture, what I'm going to call architecture thinking. Architecture thinking serves as a guide on how to strive for innovation in business, industry, and higher education. This philosophy has never been more important. The incredibly complex challenges we face as a society demand new ways of thinking that cross boundaries. It meets a need for thinking and working that respects and deepens the culture of individual disciplines. But more importantly, encourages the innovation across disciplines that will be critical in both confronting global challenges and envisioning a new future. I know that you work with other disciplines in this school. The more that can happen, the better. This adaptability and the ability to cross-link ideas are critical competencies and skills for leaders today and in the future. Albert Einstein said, "We cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them." Divergent thinking is a thought process or method used to generate creative ideas by exploring many possible solutions, explored in a short amount of time, and in unexpected connections are drawn. After the process of divergent thinking has been completed, ideas and information are organized and structured around convergent thinking. The word divergent refers to the different, unalike, contrasting, at odds, or creative thought. It involves free-flowing thinking about and acting on the possibilities. Divergent thinking requires the ability to see things from multiple perspectives. And how many of you have seen Rubens' vase? It's a pretty common exercise. What do you see at first glance, second glance, third, fourth, and fifth glance, if you take it into a three-dimensional format? It helps to demonstrate our ability to form interpretations of the same problem. It focuses our cognitive identities and pattern matching on the overall picture, not on the parts, on the individual pieces. I want you to take another look at the picture and ask yourself, what are you thinking when you face yourself? First glance, second glance, third and fourth glance. Who are you and what are your unexpected pathways? And are you willing to change? Are you willing to adapt? As a designer in divergent thinking, I found I'm naturally drawn to and driven by the process of synthesis and systems. It scares the heck out of me. I am naturally drawn to challenges and risks and new ideas. It's not comfortable, but it's who I am. And I hope it's what you have in you as well. As compared to the scientific, analytical, problem-focused mindset, this user-focused, solution-based, synthesis-driven, but risk-taking prospect is critical as you go forward. It's not that it doesn't have facts-based. It's not that it's not evidence-based. So many will criticize divergent thinking and design thinking as having no foundation. It's all emotion. That's definitely not true. And it's based on, yes, imagination and intuition, but modeling and testing and redesign and implementation and continual interactive adjustment. It's action-oriented. It's focused on the near term and the long term. It's lateral thinking, not linear. So what are divergent thinking leaders like? And this is where I want to make the transition into architects as leaders. And what are the skills that you are developing now that I will bet you will use as much or more than some of your design skills, your actual design talents in architecture? Divergent leaders are distinguished by their, yes, creativity, but they have a high level, and this has been demonstrated by studies, a high level of empathy and ability to affect change. Empathy meaning they relate to the people that they are working for, designing for, leading. It has led to what is being described as an idea generation. You're part of an idea generation. And there's a growing interest in this concept of divergent leadership or design thinking leadership. It's a different way of seeing and thinking and leads to a different type of institutional leaders. It's not just based on one's ability to think, but it's also on their ability to guide behavior in others to be design thinkers, divergent thinkers as well. And think of some examples of divergent thinkers. Of course, Da Vinci, who's very, very much in focus today. Ford, Edison, Hemingway, Branson, of course, Steve Jobs. I think Whitney Wolf certainly fits in that category. Yes, even Cher. And I would like to add, most importantly to that list, Pope Francis. I think Pope Francis is a divergent thinking and a design thinking leader. He thinks laterally. He thinks in terms of ecology, human ecology, natural ecology, and the intersections. If you read Laudato Si, you begin to see how he makes those interconnections. He is an urban designer. We have a pope who's a designer. We should be celebrating that and recognizing that. And I don't know if you have curriculum based around his writings, but they're very, very powerful. both on urban design and urban planning dimensions. And I would add to this list, Mayor Pete, our very own Mayor Pete, has taken a city who, if you've grown up in South Bend like I have, you have never seen as much progressive change and optimism and empathy at the same time occur in such a short period of time around such a transformational leader. We are truly fortunate to have him with us at this time. The most creative industries today are those that are led by divergent or design thinking leaders. In technology, design and creative arts, obviously. I'd even say in the food industry, nonprofit organizations, not so much in healthcare, not so much in education and higher education, particularly traditional colleges and universities. We see divergent thinking and creative thinking at the city level, not so much at the state and the federal level. Our government is desperately in need of creative, divergent thinking leaders. All you got to do is turn on the news to see that. The other notion of leadership is a notion called transformational leadership. This is where a single individual can make a huge difference around their ability to draw a vision and to be able to pull others into that vision and to drive that vision and to make change quickly. But that vision and that change and those individuals go on beyond just the charisma of that one individual. The design thinking leader is now a very common conversation. Jim Brown, the CEO and president of the design firm IDEO, defines the characteristics of a design leader as, again, empathy, integrative thinking, optimism. We can do this. We're not bogged down by why we can't do this. Let's experiment. Let's collaborate. Nothing's perfect on the first round. It's iterative. We're going to fail. We're going to learn from those failures, and we're going to move on. Jonathan Lewis of Hanson, the digital experience agency, describes it as a design thinking leader sees the world as problems and products. Could be information, could be artifacts, activities, services, systems, and environments. They view themselves as a product of design thinking, crafting themselves every day, being conscious of how they think, who they interact, what are their behaviors and their attitudes. They cultivate the abilities of others with empathy and optimism again. They're conduits, provocateurs, shepherds, motivators. Are these characteristics that you resonate with? I hope so. They collaborate and communicate outside of the normal realm in much more engaging venues. They love ambiguity and the opportunity to form models and test them out again. Modeling, storytelling, sketching. And they take that prototype, they love feedback. I know juries aren't the funnest thing, but they love the feedback because they're quick and eager to make change, iteration. The best transformational leaders provide solutions and they take action and they make a difference. They move swiftly from passion to the idea of implementation. It's not just talk. Good execution requires a plan and the right people. And so they bring the right people to the table and they empower people. They don't make decisions for them. So it's a very democratic process. Companies that do this best become market leaders. Google, for example, was not the first internet search engine, but Google was the first to really monetize search. As a result, Google has become a verb. And the company is a tech giant with record growth rates and a revenue of $74.5 billion in 2015. But Google's not unique. Many other companies have followed a similar set of execution principles, which are required for success. They also waste no time in getting started. Look at Blockbuster to BlackBerry to Kodak. They ran into their deepest troubles a decade or more. Warnings appeared. None of their leaders developed effective transformation plans in time to halt the decline of those companies. At the other end of the spectrum is Netflix. They aggressively rolled out a new streaming service in parallel with mailing the old DVDs. It provided a much more winning strategy. So that's the prototype. And you know over time, your best bet will never be an ongoing best bet forever. And that's where that testing and that prototyping and slipping in and moving is so critical. Think about how that works in an architectural practice. Think about what are the services architects beyond traditional design, and really think outside the box. And how you in a firm can begin to develop these prototype service dimensions and streams, and how they can be brought in as your practice will shift and change over time. With membership of 100 million homes in 190 countries, Netflix is a leader of a totally reconfigured TV and movie landscape. We were just talking at St. Mary's, we're about to bag our cable TV contract because our students only stream. We could save a lot of money. And that happened very, very fast. It's about a multi-phase strategy to reposition, move, be ready to change, love that risk, move forward and finding new ways to grow. Execute today, improve tomorrow. Prototype. Prototype yourself. Try new things. Fail. Move around it. Balance short-term with long-term goals. Test initiatives and new innovative approaches. Be a student of the game. Learn about how others innovate, how they failed. What were their prototypes? Invest in your own development. One of the best ways I have found is excellent mentors. Mentors in life, not just professional, but in all dimensions of life. It's those examples, living examples, where you will learn the most, and the networks around those mentors. And you will have them for a lifetime. And you can watch and anticipate what's to come. They love to learn from you because they're going through the same continual transformation. So that is one of the most best pieces of advice that I can give you. I have been the great beneficiary of wonderful lifetime mentors. Again, in professional life, personal life, and spiritual life. What about this notion of intersections and a special word that I love? Serendipity. Serendipity. One of the most important things you can do as a leader is develop an aptitude for making desirable discoveries by accident. Be open to accidents. Place yourself in places that are unpredictable and accidents, and I'm not talking physical. Experiential accidents that you didn't expect. It's what Phoenix-based CEO mentor Tom Zender calls serendipity. I'm sure all of us can think of instances in our lives that came about in that very way. Part luck, maybe some skill, because you're in a place by virtue of what you've done and what you've accomplished. But then the luck part comes into play. I'll admit, on the surface, it doesn't appear to be smart. Oh, gotta be strategic, gotta plan, gotta execute the plan. Then life happens. It's not the most direct way, maybe, to achieve your objectives, but you can exceed your objectives if you open yourself to serendipity. Often it leads to innovations, creations, and solutions beyond your or anyone else's imaginations. Serendipity is a combination of chance occurrence, and the possibilities are endless. Could be that you're at a conference. Could be you're sitting on the airplane next to someone. Could be a blog post that goes viral, introduction to someone by a friend. Acknowledging that chance and circumstance beyond our control often plays a big part in success. I'll tell you about two serendipitous experiences that I've had. One is when I was dean at Arizona, University of Arizona. I was very happily placed in a college with a very strong school of architecture, planning and landscape architecture. I'm again very inherently multidisciplinary, so I'm trying to look for venues to bring those disciplines across to work on some of the bigger problems. There's also at the same time an excellent college of medicine there, which had a very unique institute. It was a Center for Integrative Medicine with an individual by the name of Andrew Weil. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he is a groundbreaking medical educator who believes that traditional medicine, Western medicine, is too focused on one dimension of our health. And he has done a lot of great work around the holistic dimensions of health, everything from nutrition to the spiritual dimension, emotional well-being. And so this word well-being has become much more of an important word to us. Well, I'm sitting in my office one day, and I'm thinking I would love to be able to connect to the College of Medicine at Arizona. Because when I was at Clemson, we had a Center for Healthcare Design. It was all about designing a safe operating room. Very good research coming out of that, from lighting to the scale to the arrangement of the furniture, et cetera, et cetera. So I get a phone call. I'm sitting there in Arizona now, and it's from the director, Andrew Weil, and they're looking to hire Dr. Esther Sternberg, National Institutes of Health, wanting to come to Arizona to be part of this integrative medicine school. And she does groundbreaking work. This is all quantitative work on the impact of the environment on the physiological dimensions of the body. She does work with body sensors, sweat patches, where she can measure heart rate variability, hormonal activity that measures stress. And she's working with functional MRIs to where students can walk in real time through environments and you can measure the stress impact. The biggest area in medicine today are stress-related diseases. They're rampant. And the more that we can understand how the environment impacts health, the better. We know about DNA, right? Genetics. We know about nutrition. But what about the places we live and work 24 hours a day and its impact? And being able to measure, because right, in Western medicine, unless you can measure it physiologically, it doesn't exist. So this, I don't want to say fell into my lap, but serendipitously, these entities are working to come together. I get a phone call. I acted quickly. Yes, we will bring her on to the faculty at Arizona, and we were able to co-found the Institute for Place and Wellbeing, which is where this groundbreaking research is taking place. I don't claim credit that I called Esther Sternberg up to come. That was like a dream. But that's serendipity. You need to know when to jump on it. There were skeptics in my college. Well, I'm going to do that. We're spending a lot of money on that. We could be doing better over here. It's a risk. You got to know when serendipity is looking and opportunity is looking at you and when to jump on that. The next example is now I'm dean at Clemson. I'll ask you this. Talk about serendipity. What is a new historic preservation program in Charleston? And Clemson's up in the upstate of South Carolina. But a new Master of Historic Preservation in Charleston, South Carolina, just starting one, right? And a rusty submarine, a Confederate submarine that's sunk and it's on the floor of the Charleston Bay. What does that got to do with the materials engineer? And what has that got to do with the dry dock on the Cooper River? Well, I started a historic preservation program in Charleston. I became friends with a material scientist who worked at Clemson. I got a call that the president of the Senate of South Carolina, who was a big, we'll just call him a Confederate enthusiast, had worked with the guy that found the Titanic, I can't remember the gentleman's name, had discovered it on the floor of the bay. They were raising it up. Maybe some of you read National Geographic and all the very sophisticated technology it took to bring it up. They brought it over. Now here's another serendipitous piece. It is a abandoned Navy station in North Charleston. There was an old Navy lab. They were able to get use of it to bring the submarine into a big tank of salt water to figure out how to preserve it, because it's been fused with calcium. The minute the oxygen hits it, it's a gone dust. So this materials engineer, I was able to introduce to this group of investors from the President of the Senate, these Confederate enthusiasts. That grew to the entire laboratory being given to Clemson University through my negotiations. Now we have a world-class group of archaeologists taking all the body remains out of and trying to figure out how this thing had sunk to begin with. So the lab is worth $30 million. Then we were given a dry dock that was adjacent on the Cooper River, which dry docks mean you have a dock and you can have all the water taken out of it to do work on a boat. You can't even build dry docks anymore. That was worth $30 million. Plus we were given 110 acres of land. Now this is an abandoned, this is not a pretty site, but all the redevelopment from the peninsula of Charleston is marching right up north into North Charleston, and all the redevelopment is happening there. So now Clemson has an amazing research facility called the Restoration Institute. And the concept, I founded this institute with all these things I didn't expect to come into the picture. But when one piece starts, it attracts the next, and if you begin to make those connections, you begin to see a vision. That's serendipity. So let me just talk about the university and colleges and presidencies. I'm hoping that I'm looking at a president sitting up there, college university president. There's many challenges facing higher education. The affordability, many of you are dealing with that question right now. What's the perceived value of the public of a college education? The impact of technology, alternative models of education. Student bodies are more racially and just diverse in general than they've ever been before. They're very, very passionate about issues and concerns and rights. Many come from with enormous financial need. Globalization and automation is changing the workforce, and it's changing the kinds of degrees that we offer. And presidents today are accountable to a dizzying array of stakeholders and constituents. Father Jenkins has got a big job. Students and faculty and administrators, parents hyper involved in their children's experience, alumni who want to maintain the experience they had as a student, treasured moments, no change. Community leaders who want to influence the university's role. Political leaders who demand greater accountability for the tuition paid. And of course, sports boosters. The vast range of leadership skills needed today include CEO, entrepreneur, politician, and thought leader. You got to have an academic vision. You got to be able to drive research. You have to have that knowledge of athletics, administrative and financial acumen. You're the key fundraiser for the institution. You got to know marketing and communications, political deftness in an era of 24/7 news and inflammatory social media. You have to manage pressure from the community, again, and political leaders around things like sexual assaults, legalized guns on campus, the ever-growing transgender population that's coming into universities and colleges. Then you need to chart a difficult path with colleges. How many colleges do you have here at Notre Dame? Yeah. And you have great deans who want to do great things. So as a president, you're trying to encourage entrepreneurialism and success at the college level. At the same time, you're trying to get those deans to work together as an institution. That's a balancing act. All housed within what universities call shared governance. That means everyone feels like they have a role and a say in the governing of the institution. As institutions become much more businesses and enterprises, very difficult balance. There was a survey done recently by the Deloitte Center for Higher Ed Excellence that talked about what are the characteristics of presidents. Now let's talk about the veteran president. We'll say kind of the old model president. They in this survey, they see higher education as a collegial intellectual community where the president's the academic leader. I like to say Father Hesper would fit, at least from my view and my vision and my picture of a college president. Father Ted is it. Thought leader, social critic, brought those issues to the campus, fit the mission, was one of the faculty. That's different than today's president. And if you look at who are ranked as top college university presidents, Michael Crow from Arizona State would sit pretty much at the top. Arizona State University is one of the largest institutions in the United States. And it is, and the model that Michael Crow is as a president is much more of a CEO. He sees Arizona State as an enterprise. It's an enterprise within itself. It's also enterprising in a business development capacity in the state of Arizona. Very different from the model of a Father Ted. Neither one is right or wrong. They're in different times and serving different purposes. New university presidents see themselves through a financial and operational lens, how to get things done with a cooperative spirit. They see themselves as CEOs, not in a top-down sense, but in a more general manager sense, surrounded by skilled executive team. So you'll see presidents with cabinets, with individuals with real specified specialties, whether it's information technology, enrollment management, it's going to be student affairs. All of those people are very, very specialized and important. The top functions that presidents see themselves doing, fundraising, top fundraiser. What is Notre Dame's endowment? Huge. We'll just say it's huge. Presidents spend a great portion of their time talking to supporters of the institution, growing new supporters to the institution to help drive what the institution does. Alumni relations, keeping connection. You all will graduate and you will hopefully be very highly connected to Notre Dame for life so that you can benefit, but that you will also get ahead and support those students who are going to be following you. And as a strategic planner, looking at the world, looking at workforce, looking at the dynamics of delivering education and how it changes. Chief strategist, communicator, and storyteller. Well, where do presidents come from? You ever think about what was Father Jenkins' path to the presidency? Well, traditionally, they've come up through the faculty. They started as, I did, an assistant professor on tenure track. They come up through the ranks. They maybe then take on some administrative roles. Many will have become a provost, who's like the chief academic officer, and then they'll rise to the presidency. Not so much anymore, because the nature of the institutions have changed and their mission and how they're run. Oftentimes now we see business executives becoming presidents of institutions. We see government officials. We see that with Mitch Daniels at Purdue. And now we see increasingly deans of colleges bypass the provost and go right into a presidency. That's my path. Because I hope you see that the role of the president now is much more into the nuts and bolts, the strategy, the vision making. It's not so much looking at academic programs and the curriculum and getting into the details as much as it is forecasting out and dealing much more externally on behalf of the institution. And that's what a dean's skill set is. And that's why they move into that role much more than in the past. The emphasis is on the short term and the long term. What is Notre Dame doing today? Starting a lot of new centers, a lot of new degrees, but I can also tell you it has a strategic vision for the future. And you will find that today, leaders, whether the divergent leaders or more traditional, are constantly learning. And so it's that lifetime pursuit. There's the growth of this one area called professional coaches. All CEOs today have a coach. What does that mean? These are individuals with experience related to theirs that they can talk to. Being a CEO of anything can be a very lonely job because you're having to make tough decisions about your institution. You're having to continually make change and bring people along, but you can't necessarily go and talk about the frustrations. Maybe you're anxious about a decision that has to be made. There's not a lot of places to go to do that. And so this industry of professional coaches has become, I have a professional coach who I depend on a great deal because it gives me an outside perspective. But I'm also able to have someone that has gone through it as well. So it's reassuring. I've been fortunate in my time as a dean to be exposed to a lot of different disciplines. I came up through an agricultural college at Purdue. I then moved to the University of Kentucky in an agricultural college. So I was very exposed to life sciences, agricultural sciences. When I went to Clemson, I had about the most unusual college in the United States. I don't think there's one like it. This is architecture, arts, and humanities. So it was creative arts. So this is performing and creative arts. It's humanities, history, English, communication studies. It is philosophy and religion. And then construction science, planning, and architecture. I loved it. I loved it. In any 1 hour, I could go from a meeting of faculty in religious studies, and then I'd be with a construction scientist. Mind-bending. And I loved every minute because I'm a divergent thinker. But the fun part was, and I do see it as fun, what are the commonalities? And what are the special pieces that you can bring together in synthesis that students can gain from? So with construction science and philosophy and religious studies and philosophy, it was ethics. Ethics. And ethics in the business of construction science. And so we developed a business ethics program and then went on to develop a center. And that pulled in a bunch of other disciplines in addition to those that I mentioned. That to me is fun. These jobs are fun when you can create those new kind of opportunities for students in areas that are ahead of where academia generally tends to find itself. I was able to start PhD in, it's called Rhetorics, Communication, and Information Design. It may be now called digital media, but basically it's a very traditional English department, fine arts, communication studies, and philosophy, and architecture around digital communications, digital art, digital media. Those faculty never talked to each other before. Do they talk to each other here? But when you get them in a room, it's amazing. It's amazing. And I will tell you that hiring new faculty today, that's what they want. That's what they're looking for. And that's what puts them on fire. And that's what's happening at St. Mary's right now. Now I'll tell you a little bit about that in a moment. One last point on mentors. I had the great opportunity, and this is what I mean by stepping out of your usual path. I had the opportunity to be a fellow of the American Council on Education, which is a pretty competitive program where you want to study the presidency of a college or university. And this was 18 years ago. And I spent half a year with the president at Ohio State University, Britt Kerwin, and the other half with the president of Ohio University, Bob Glidden. I went everywhere with them. Everywhere, every meeting. And then in between meetings, the presidents would tell me what they thought of the last meeting and the issues that were going on. Of course, I would keep everything confidential. What an eye-opener. To be able to see the kind of schedule that a president keeps, the kind of issues, moral, ethical issues that they face every day, the kind of need for the vision to be infused in that optimism and empathy that a leader like that needs to show was tremendous. I was also able to observe a whole bunch of other leaders from every walk, from the university to the state legislators, to the donors, to business and industry, and I got to see the best, and I got to see the worst. The latter was probably more informational than the former. So that mentor opportunity, and that was a year out of my life. I had to move to those campuses to have that total immersive experience. It was transformational for me. So that brings me to St. Mary's. Now, if you believe in this lifelong pursuit of passion, of vocation, of mission, of profession, I'm what I like to think of as coming around to the mission. St. Mary's was not in my field of view. Being president at St. Mary's College, I was happy as a dean at Arizona, doing good things, enjoying life. And I got nominated for St. Mary's College position. I got contacted by a search firm, and I thought, wow. I mean, I'm from South Bend. My sister went to St. Mary's. I had never been part of an all-women's college. I had not been part of a smaller liberal arts institution, but I knew St. Mary's very well. My best friends for life have gone to St. Mary's as well. It was like a lightning bolt. It was one of the few times, maybe the only time in my life, when I felt like I had encountered a calling. It was a calling that I'm being asked to come and do this job at St. Mary's. I love St. Mary's. I love all women's education. I love the Catholic mission, having been at all public institutions. It was an opportunity for me to come and to feel the full spiritual dimensions of institutions where I couldn't even talk about that other, most crucial part of why we're alive. And that's your faith and your spirit, something beyond you. So at St. Mary's, what I'm trying to do as president is to respect the traditions and the long history of St. Mary's College, but at the same time, taking some of the divergent thinking, the design thinking, the openness to serendipity, and make it inherently a characteristic of the institution. As I mentioned, we have great new faculty. Some great faculty have been here for a long time. We're looking at recreating the structure of the institution. We're looking at, yeah, degrees are important, but I think what we're learning about a degree, it's not the degree, it's the character that the student gains as they go through that degree. The character, the grit, the perspective that you come out with at the end of your however many years. We're looking now at how do we attract students around passions, not degrees, degree tracks or majors. How can your passion, how can you be conscious and understand it coming in even before college starts? And then pursue that passion through interdisciplinary degrees, experiences outside the classroom. Some of those experiences will be traditional classes, they'll be study abroad, or they'll be, we are thinking about pop-up collaboratory experiences where students can work on projects together in a very short period of time. So it's that design thinking. So it's great. It's a great opportunity in a smaller institution where you can be a little bit more facile and open to new ideas and new approaches. And the faculty are game. So I'm hoping that, again, the design thinking, the talents that I learned, like you're learning today, in creativity, you can take to a leader and change institutions and how they see themselves and how they see their products. So if you can lead today thinking about that Rubens vase and how you how you see yourself and however many dimensions you can have and how open you are to change, adaptation, to serendipity. Are you willing to take a risk? Are you willing to take a very different path to really discover yourself? Because you will. As architects, I happen to believe you're better trained for that than anyone else on this campus. So I want to thank you, and I'd love to open it up for questions or comments or thoughts. Thank you. Yes. Yeah, right here.
So here's something that I wonder about. I do understand what you're saying about how the demands on college presidents put them in a position where they have to be a bit more CEO than intellectual leaders. But if the business model gets adopted, how do you prevent students from becoming consumers? Because my experience in the classroom is that if you're dealing with consumers, you can't teach. You have to deal with students, not consumers. So how are we going to prevent the sort of business model at the top from trickling down and turning your students into consumers?
It's really hard, and I think they become consumer-oriented when they have a very short-term goal in mind, which is the first job out of school. And any smart individual can see that jobs change so quickly that you might have that talent set for that first job, particularly if it's in STEM fields. Those areas change more quickly than even the liberal arts do, liberal arts oriented jobs. And so by demonstrating to them that it is not that first set of skills, which yes, universities are generally good at doing, but it is the fourth, fifth, sixth job, or the job you're going to create. That's what I'd like to speak to students about. What jobs are you going to create in the future? Use your imagination. And what's the skill set that's going to get you there? That takes them out of, okay, I want to graduate as fast as I can, for as little money as I can. And I just want that job. I want that guarantee, because it's no guarantee, right? That first job. And the power of the alumni stories, Notre Dame's got them, like beautiful stories that demonstrate that, is the most powerful convincer to students. Where, I'll give you an example. One of our alumni, she graduated in English literature. What are you going to do with English literature major, right? Parents were upset, very smart, wonderfully creative individual. She graduated and she went on to dentistry school. So who would have figured that connection? I just had dinner with her a few months ago. She now owns 3 dentist clinics, so she's a businesswoman. And 2 of those clinics are in Appalachia portion of Ohio. So she's figured out a business model where you can deliver essential services to those in need. So it's telling those stories. Don't think about that first. And yes, that is important. And loans are important. Paying back loans are important. I'm not trying to diminish that. But when you can demonstrate to students that they have a life path and that it's going to take wonderful turns and that degree is just kind of is an entry point, you get them off that. They begin to think beyond. Other questions? Yeah.
Aside from just thinking about what you told us about your own career, what are some skills you might suggest to build up qualities of a leader, aside from having a job in which you're leading? Do we suggestions?
I think what's really essential is you're able to begin to understand a culture of an organization or an entity. And what's unique about that group
and be able to articulate. Articulation and communication is probably the single most, in addition to the vision and seeing beyond and what the possibilities are for that entity. If you can't articulate it, then it doesn't do any good. And articulation can come in many different ways. Of course, verbal articulation and having that relationship with people is critical. Written is as well, but I also happen to believe the whole multimedia piece. But it's also in the storytelling, is if you can't connect to people and what's important to them and where they are, then it's very difficult to convince them of the vision. But being able to walk in and get, again, a sense quickly of a culture, and reading the cues and looking at the patterns and what's important to people, but then seeing the possibilities, because oftentimes they're kind of where they are. If I had a nickel for every time I was told, well, we've always done it this way, and we tried that, I would have retired a long time ago. And I know I drive people crazy. I'll say, well, so what? So what if you tried it before? Don't tell me you can't do it, because time has changed. The context changed, things are different. And let's look at it from a different purpose. When you say you can't do something, generally that means that you're investing in keeping it the same, thus you can't do anything different. But if you're saying the organization is going to be different as a result of you doing that different, it's going to be better, then you can oftentimes move on. So I'm very serious about this, being open to risk. You got to be open to risk. And so what if you fail? I've seen alumni that have had desperately bad experiences that have come out and succeeded, and they wouldn't be the same person without that. And that's where those networks and mentors can mean so much. It's the risk taking, it's that vision, and it's being open to opportunities. But if your eyes aren't open to those opportunities, they'll fly by. That's where you're designers, and you're able to take things that wouldn't seem like they could go together, and you can put them together, and you can identify them as opportunities. Yes.
I'd like to hear you talk a little bit more about risk. And a lot of people, designers and architects of all sorts, talk about doing multiple iterations, failing often, failing fast, failing forward. And one of the comments about higher education institutions is that they tend to be risk averse.
Mm-hmm.
And so how have you dealt with that?
Yeah, and notice I said that healthcare and universities and colleges are the least divergent. There's the fewest divergent thinking leaders. Now Stanford's a bit different because their D school has helped. Now it's infusing in the rest of the institution. But I think what colleges and universities need to do is to reward risk, to allow prototyping of academic degrees, of experiences for students, and not penalize for failure. I think promotion and tenure, absolutely essential at an institution. But it also makes everything calcified because you're afraid you can't take a risk because you get this promotion and tenure threat. I think if somehow risk-taking can be rewarded and it's actually part of the expectation for faculty, that's a wonderful thing, because then if students see faculty doing that and taking risks and failing, but then dissecting why, and I think you can actually set out an experiment and anticipate failure. And you can talk about it ahead of time and what might we expect. So it's not a surprise. And then you have some strategies to be able to deal with that. So I think design thinking is a part of a curriculum that could be infused throughout an institution. And that's something that I mentioned we're looking at St. Mary's. How can we infuse design thinking as a mode of teaching? And the Stanford's D School look at it. They're doing a lot of very interesting things. And that actual approach is something that's rewarded by faculty. But it's an intentional part of the curriculum, the skill set, the ability to prototype, to think laterally. And you can do that in any class, really, if you think about it, with different subjects.
I thoroughly enjoyed your talk. I'm curious as what you think the role of a college or university should be in a community. And with the Purdue and West Lafayette, of course, dominates, no doubt. St. Mary's is a little bit different, but you were in Tucson with the University of Arizona in a very large school. But what role should the president and the college play in the community?
Well, I have always believed that there should be a seamless integration, that the college or university is integral to the leadership of a city and business and industry. The most successful communities that I've seen are where, and this was happening in Tucson, it was really exciting. I was part of a group of vision leaders that was brought together by it's called the Downtown Tucson Partnership, because a lot of the redevelopment was happening in downtown. That had the mayor, had the president of University of Arizona. I was fortunate enough to be involved because I made the first off-campus location for U of A in downtown. It had all the biggest corporation CEOs in the area. We met regularly and we had conversations and we began to, number one, work together because it never had happened before. We then started to bring in the leaders of some of the smaller towns and unincorporated areas, so it became a little bit more of a guiding regional group. So I think that the university has an obligation to be a thought leader for the community and help guiding it, and then bringing the resources and the expertise of the faculty to help solve some of the community's problems. I see that happening with Notre Dame. I didn't see it for a long time, but I think more recently, it's been a really terrific move for Notre Dame to get engaged in the RDA. And that's essential. And that's when communities really take off. At Clemson, Greenville, South Carolina was sitting there. It had been a textile mill company, had been long gone, long gone. I mean, they had this beautiful river running down the center of Greenville, and it was a different color every day of the week based on the dye in the textile. And they had all the buildings backed onto, it was awful. They had a big, huge highway bridge and covered it, couldn't even see. And it wasn't until it took a certain visionary mayor, some of us folks from Clemson drove over, we then established a design center, then the business college came in with a location in downtown Clemson. Then about that time, BMW opened a plant, the engineering program at Clemson came in. You know, it's about a half hour, 40-minute drive from Clemson to Greenville's like a different place. I mean, they opened up the river, they got green space, lots of residential development downtown. The economy is unbelievable. But that's when those forces come together is when communities take. And I don't discount St. Mary's.
No, I don't.
So, you know, St. Mary's it's always been part of the economy here, in healthcare and in the business programs, the nursing program, and I'm determined to make it of the same mold. So we are now sitting on the Regional Development Authority Committee for the first time. Yes, St. Mary's. So all institutions need to play a role. IUSB, Bethel, everything. Good question. I'm a big believer in that. Other questions? So how many of you are going to be college presidents? Yes? It's a wonderful, wonderful experience, and I firmly believe that design thinking skill set, you will be amazed how you will put that to use. And it may have nothing to do with the design of the building.
Do you have any plans to offer design courses at St. Mary's?
Yes, we've been kind of talking a little bit about that. Probably in the area of design thinking, we're looking at a gaming institute. We have a lot of, we're learning that the gaming industry is being driven now more and more by women CEOs. So, you know, you're able to pull in the creative writing program, of course, the art program, computer science. There's a lot of the humanities that can really come into play with that, languages, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a perfect ground to bring in. What I'm dreaming of, and I said this to the faculty, they probably think I'm not. I want to create intellectual academic playgrounds. That's what I mean by the passions of the students driving what we do, is that empathy part of the user driving, not just the major. That's where it gets transactional. Sorry, what are you going to major in? Well, what job's that going to get you? Whereas if you could talk about where their inherent passions are, and you get them young, a little bit younger, like coming up through high school, they're thinking more about where their place in the world is and helping them discover that. And to chronicle it. Really chronicle through their 4+ years, the experiences that they're feeling, what they may have failed at and how they got around that. Because that's, again, employers want to see that as much as they want to see what degree you have. So it's a great, again, a school like St. Mary's has an attitude of, we can do this, it's empathetic, it's optimistic, the scale is right, it has such a strong mission around women. And I happen to believe today, we need empowered women more than ever, and St. Mary's does that very well. You've all been very great this evening. I appreciate it, and I look forward to returning and joining. Yes.
I just want to thank you for a really wonderful lecture and talk. When I first came to Notre Dame about 25 years ago, more, a friend of mine took me up to see Father Ted. That has survived. And he said to me one thing. He said, you know, you're going to be here a long time, probably. I didn't think that. It probably was important. He said, you know, this place has a lot of awards. And there may come a time when you see those awards are getting too big. Then you have to look at the perspective of the students. And those awards will get a lot small. Now, every institution has awards, and we're not here to talk about the awards of Notre Dame, but I think the perspective of students and how they perceive their education, what you said about failure, about not thinking about their education as a degree seeking objective, but rather character building. And I don't think that's always clear to students. The parents are always pushing, guidance counselors are always pushing for a particular viewpoint about the objectification of the world in terms of the objective. And we forget about this other. And what I really enjoy about your talk is how it links so many different dimensions of life to the pursuit of just living and educating constantly yourself throughout your career, throughout your education. I just hope that the students that were in the room were listening to this and thinking that when it seems so daunting, not to be afraid of the failures you suggested, that's where the growth, that's where the learning actually happens. You don't learn from success stories. I don't know why we don't. But we don't. We only learn from failure. And failure is what is actually brought up. The great inventions and great things. But that was a really inspirational talk.
Well, thank you. Now, your comment about starting with the students is just one notion we're talking about at St. Mary's. The schools talk about how they're gonna mold and change and form these students. They're pieces of clay. We're gonna make something out of them. Now, we're talking more now about how the student comes and shapes St. Mary's. That they come from very diverse backgrounds and experiences themselves. They know a lot, and they have a lot of passions and interests and talents. They form the institution. It's really, again, it's that empathy. It's starting with the user and how it can continually transform St. Mary's. And I think institutions have fallen asleep about their students. When all the protests on campuses started, well before the elections, I mean, they had students at Arizona were like marching every day. It was about transgender rights. It was about rights. Because the institution fell asleep about what it was there for and really thinking about those students. And the administration was afraid. Like most college presidents, deathly afraid of protests on the campus and looking bad, and the board's going to get mad, and politicians are going to get mad. And they're like, no. Instead of saying, let them come and shape the institution. And make that, again, the center mission of why the institution's there.
Well, thank you again. I appreciate it. Good luck with the rest of the-
I don't know where it comes from, but I just thank you.
Hey.